Hello, ladies. Tonight we are going to review Wuthering Heights, directed by Emerald Fennell, starring Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi. What is the plot of our movie? Well, it goes as follows. A young Romani named Heathcliff has been taken in as a boy by the Earnshaws. Though he and the daughter of the Earnshaws, Catherine, grow up to be the greatest of friends, her brother, on the other hand, Hindley, abuses him, and once he grows up to take ownership of Wuthering Heights, he decides to treat Heathcliff as nothing more than a slave. The situation gets incredibly worse for Heathcliff as Edgar and Isabella Linton, owners of Thrushcross Grange, arrive to Wuthering Heights. The Lintons may have accepted Catherine's overall beauty and free-spirited presence, but Heathcliff, on the other hand, is scolded and tormented by both Edgar and Hindley, so much so that Heathcliff declares his revenge. Upon hearing the news that Catherine, his lifelong friend, is going to end up marrying Edgar, he leaves Wuthering Heights but doesn't remain to hear the rest of Catherine's motivation. After being gone for many years, Heathcliff returns to Wuthering Heights as a rich man, mysteriously, and he tries to not only reunite with Catherine, but to return with a vengeance to make life a living hell for both Edgar Linton and Hindley Earnshaw, and aims to inflict trauma onto their children that he will eventually claim in the same way that he had suffered. Oh. Right. That isn't the plot of 2026's Wuthering Heights. What was I thinking? That is actually the plot of the book Wuthering Heights, the 19th century novel written by Emily Brontë. To be fair, there are many adaptations that aren't exactly a one-for-one retelling of the original novel, but the only exception that was critically acclaimed despite its deviations was the 1939 film directed by William Wyler, who directed... what was he known for? Oh, I don't know. 1959's Ben-Hur, and The Best Years of Our Lives? Goodness gracious, Emerald. Those are some mighty shoes to fill. There have been adaptations that starred Ralph Fiennes, and there was a miniseries that starred Tom Hardy as Heathcliff himself, both of which, admittedly, that I haven't seen. But what I have heard is that one of them tackles some of the more darker themes of the original book, and the other one is just a straightforward retelling of the original classic novel. So, what has Emerald Fennell done to adapt Emily Brontë's classic? How did she incorporate and execute its plot lines and themes of generational trauma, obsession, and revenge, intertwined with issues about class and race, considering the setting and Heathcliff's race playing such a pivotal role? Well, I'm gonna have to save you the trouble, dear viewer, by saying that she has done none of the above. You see, the iteration that we are left with is nothing that even resembles the soul of Wuthering Heights. Apart from Emerald Fennell borrowing and cherry-picking several set pieces, the setting, the characters from the classic novel, with the final product being Emerald Fennell's personal, self-insert, really risible Harlequin smut with Wuthering Heights in its title. The plot of this version, imagine Wuthering Heights, except your two main leads find nothing romantic about one another, outside of the fact that they're both played by attractive actors. Heathcliff's revenge subplot is only to spite Catherine, and his abusive marriage to Isabella is only played for laughs. Heathcliff is named by Catherine after her dead brother, but what if Heathcliff actually has a name? Oh, and we can't forget the sex scenes to top everything off in this miserable, boring, tombeified slog of a film. Reports have shown that Fennell describes this adaptation as something that she imagined when reading the book when she was 14 years old, and after watching this malformed excrement, it makes a perfect amount of sense. But even as a standalone film, it is a horribly paced, grotesque fanfiction in which Emerald Fennell herself plays the spoiled main lead, and the only ones that are being subjected to this debauchery are the supporting boyfriends that are being dragged by their girlfriends who are only in it for the steamy vibes. But before excoriating this movie, and while I will make some adaptation comparisons, I will be judging this primarily as a movie. I mean, it is my job, of course. For those of you who want a much more deeper analysis into both the book and this morbid carcass of an adaptation, you'll find other videos elsewhere on YouTube, for I am not an expert on Wuthering Heights, and I only know what I know from the research that I've made for myself. So, anything nice and delicate to say about this adaptation? Well, I will say that this adaptation, if you can call it that, does look a bit pretty in relation to its cinematography. Many wide shots of the moors, even imagery that feels inspired or ripped off from Gone with the Wind, look very majestic and beautiful. The dark and vivid color palette make every single shot feel morose, yet wonderful to look at. The costume design sometimes looks strangely titillating, especially with Catherine's clothing that look like something that you would see from a hoard-out version of someone attending Worstfest 2026. But other than that, the costume design really fits the specific vision that Emerald Fennell wanted to take. Same applies to the doll-like and artsy aesthetic and production design of the movie, whether it be the residents or the locales. And the acting from its cast members, despite the heinous material provided, do whatever they can to stand out with their performances. The child performances from Owen Cooper, who was previously on Netflix's Adolescence, who plays a young Heathcliff, and Charlotte Millington as a young Catherine are really good. Martin Clunes is terrific as Catherine's abusive, gambling-addicted, and drunk father, though how he's been established in the source is much different from this adaptation, but I digress. Shazad Latif and Alison Oliver are really remarkable in the roles as Edgar Linton and Isabella Linton, and Hong Xiao is quite solid and underrated in her sneaky role as Nellie Dean, as Catherine's companion and not the housekeeper. Once again, I digress. Other than that, it's time to shine a light on our two main stars. Your two main characters, Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff, are both terrible characters. But don't you see? I hear you insist. That's part of the elements of Wuthering Heights. Aren't they supposed to be unlikable and horrific individuals? Yes, I do agree. But there is something called context. There was a believability in the novel as to why the two cared for each other immensely. And there was an authenticity as to why the characters made these choices and went the direction they went on in the story. Both Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie have surprisingly little romantic or sexual chemistry with each other, and the way these characters grow to develop a romance for each other is incredibly shallow, contrived, and mishandled, and the film has no other answer for their affection outside of both parties being attractive, I guess. You think that there would be decent development towards the beginning of the movie when they were both children, but once you get to their adult years, you think to yourself that they've forgotten everything that made their connection so close. And I know that I'm jumping way too early in this review, but just because two certain individuals, being Catherine and Heathcliff, both had their personal struggles in their childhood, is not an excuse for some of the most baneful actions that they would cause to other individuals or to each other throughout the duration of the movie. Margot Robbie is a good actress in other films that I've seen her in, but like her co-star, Jacob Elordi, who is also terrific as the show-stealing monster in Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, is woefully cast in the role as Catherine just as much as Elordi is to Heathcliff. For characterization, if we were to take the book out of the equation, Catherine is an indecisive, insufferable, childish brat with all the mannerisms and motivations of a teenager who really doesn't know what else she wants. Even when she's married to Edgar, who in this movie is a surprisingly respectful, honorable gentleman who wants to do what's best for Catherine and wants to have a life and family with her, she treats him as an inconvenience. He's basically just treated by her as a nothing character who is just an obstacle standing in the way of the true prize, being Heathcliff. I guess it's true what they say. Nice guys do finish last. And even when Catherine is having an affair or is about to have an affair with Heathcliff, she's suddenly operating in this avoidance, hard to get kind of communication. And the only reason why she's doing that is because she doesn't want to admit that she finds him attractive. It's like, get away from me, Heathcliff. I don't want to be with you. Not because I already have a baby inside of me because of how many times that I've had, well, sex with Edgar. It's because, well, you're just so hot. If you really just want to simplify it, just look at Catherine as Emerald Fennell's self-insert version of herself, which would probably explain why Margot Robbie was so miscast for the role, considering the fact that she's playing a character that is almost 20 years younger than she is, and everything just adds up. She's a woman that doesn't really know what she wants, and is a sniveling narcissist that wants to be with this big, tall, brooding bad boy in favor of a tall, dark, and handsome bad boy that she finds irresistible, yet doesn't want to be around with or have a relationship with him for reasons. Not because of his class, not because of his race. And speaking of Heathcliff, he's not only a terrible character because he is such a banal, flat, brooding image of what Emerald Fennell envisioned that he would be when she read the novel at age 14. And yeah, that's not a joke. But his great length to be with Catherine and his revenge scheme is so petty given his characterization in this adaptation. That'll be something I will explain later on in this review. But of course, it must be said, instead of being a Romani, which played a very important factor to his drive of wanting to get revenge on Edgar Linton and Hindley Earnshaw, he's just a tall, handsome, mysterious white dude who has no depth or reason for his psychology outside of wanting to be with Catherine so badly that girls would find so sexy only because it's Jacob Elordi playing Heathcliff, and apparently was Emerald Fennell's choice when she was describing how she imagined Heathcliff would be in her 14-year-old mind, rather than add the one thing that initiates the entire plot of the book. Him being an outsider in a system that he doesn't belong in, and the whole tragedy that no matter how hard they try, him and Catherine cannot be with each other. Even when you get to the manipulative ending where the movie tells you, you know what, this is what it was all about. It is nothing but a despicable and lazy attempt to tug on your heartstrings, and it absolutely baffles me that when the movie was over, I turned around and I witnessed several girls crying their eyes out. I was like, how can you fall for something like this? Given the inept direction, characterizations between the two leads, and the overall structure and development between the two, and of all the secondary characters that I can possibly dissect, why don't we talk about Isabella Linton? In the first half of the movie, she's characterized as a very ditzy, soft-spoken ward to Edgar, not his sister, who's generally transfixed on love, the idea and tragedy of it. And once the film reaches to the halfway point upon Heathcliff's arrival at Thrushcross Grange, she's just incredibly horny for him, and there is nothing else to her character after that. But that makes Catherine very jealous, so she decides to humiliate her in front of Heathcliff at a certain point in the movie. And by the time both Heathcliff and Isabella decide to marry each other and enter this very abusive relationship where, in the book, the abusive relationship was extremely torturous for Isabella, and it served as character development for Isabella, transforming her from a brat into a much more sympathetic character, and it also falls in line and makes sense with Heathcliff's character, given his motivation to get revenge on Edgar. What happens between the two once they get into this relationship is so embarrassing writing-wise, and this is something that I'm going to bring up towards the end of this review, so please, be on the lookout for it. I haven't seen any other early works, but in this movie particularly, Emerald Fennell has this habit of wanting to exploit incredibly disturbing and sexually depraved scenes for the sake of shock value. Not necessarily to highlight a point, to emphasize the gravity of the situation, or to add any meaning behind it, but to take the audience off guard and to make the women in the back blush. Whether it's Catherine's odd sexual awakening when she sees two people enter into the barn house and they're having BDSM with the horse bridle as a mouth gag, followed by Catherine in her late 30s entertaining herself the day after, or especially during a hanging sequence. And it's at the beginning of the movie, and it's all part of this big, gigantic festival. And at a certain point in the movie, there are little boys that are making fun of the man being hung up by his noose. Why, you ask? Well, as he's dying, he has an erection. Mom, if you're watching this, I am sorry. But at the same time, I'm also doing you a favor. But anyway, what purpose did that serve? What was the point of it other than showing something for the sake of shock value? The film acts like the hanging is going to be relevant to any of the characters, especially with Catherine, since in the beginning of the movie, like after that sequence, she's very worried of being hanged for the sins that she has committed. But nope, it gets briefly mentioned during a dinner party on Christmas of a woman getting hanged, and that was the end of that. The shock value even applies to the production design. And if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Now, of course, I did mention that the production design is very artsy, doll-like, and has some stylistic decor. But there is a moment to where Catherine is now residing in Thrushcross Grange with her newlywed husband and his ward, and she's brought into her bedroom, and it's all beige. Then you look a bit closer, and you begin to notice blue veins and age spots on the wall. If you haven't linked 2 and 2 together, her wallpaper literally resembles human skin. How it's shown in the movie is meant to be artistic and even sexy for the new generation, but it's not. It's actually kind of creepy. So at a certain point, when both Catherine and Heathcliff are, they're getting it on, and they're rubbing up against each other against the skin wallpaper, it's supposed to be like this gigantic turn-on for all the single girls watching this crap, but in reality, you're thinking to yourself, I am ashamed to have bought a ticket to even watch this. Oh, and while they're rubbing up against each other next to the skin wallpaper, Heathcliff licks the wallpaper. That's just gross, man. But one of the most unsettling aspects about this movie is that being based on a book that is about generational trauma, obsession, abuse, revenge, it goes out of its way to portray sexual and marital abuse in an incredibly romanticized way. Like 50 Shades of Grey, the film wants you to think that this abuse that Heathcliff is implementing on Isabella is supposed to be comedically dark, but what happens is not even close to being funny or erotic in any way. In the book, I know that this is just an adaptation comparison, but bear with me. Heathcliff marries Isabella as a means of getting revenge on Edgar marrying Catherine. In this fanfiction, the reason why Heathcliff marries Isabella was to spite Catherine because he wants to keep being her handsome bad boy, and she wouldn't reciprocate further because of him wanting to kill Edgar and wanting to bathe in his blood, spoken like a true gentleman, so the two can run off together, and the fact that she's also bearing Edgar's child, even though she already had sex with him way too many times during their affair while she was pregnant, but never mind. In the midst of Heathcliff and Isabella's newlywed relationship, Nellie Dean arrives at Wuthering Heights, where they're currently residing, and it's in complete disarray, and Heathcliff is making her act like an aroused dog chained to the fireplace who consents to this obviously abusive relationship and allows Heathcliff to do whatever he wants with her. But it's all okay according to this movie because, hey, isn't Heathcliff dreamy? The ironic thing about Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights is that the film's title has quotation marks surrounding it as if it's doing something new or generating its own version of the story, and at the same time, this fraudulent adaptation has no respect or honor for the original source in any way, shape, or form. Its dark themes, tragic storytelling, and complex characters is all thrown out the window for the sake of insulting characterizations, book talk, smut-level writing, and appalling sex scenes, shock value, and kink, with all of the style, but no substance. Ladies, if you want to do something fun and romantic with your boyfriend, don't take him to see this movie. Why would you want to make him suffer? Like, actually do something that would strengthen your relationship with him. Like, go on a picnic. Anything is better than torturing your boyfriend, fiance, or husband's soul by having him watch 50 Shades of Heathcliff. My name is Luke Nukem, and you, my friends, and all you lovely ladies out there, have been blown away